Welcome to the Frequency Ma podcast with Sheena Isreal and Alyssa Ma. Frequency Ma is a sanctuary for the oracular and the ordinary. We explore the interwoven paths of mothering, embodied business and prosperity, self-creation and relationship, spiritual technologies like channeling and frequency keeping. Expect earth and insights to catalyze your quantum leaps. For the multi-dimensional, multi-passionates, all of you is welcome here. Journey with us. Hello and welcome to Frequency Ma. We are here today with the extraordinary, the delightful Nicole DeannaBell. And I just read that the Bell part on your website, is that a nickname?
Yes.
I always thought that that was your name, but I just learned something new.
Yeah,
And
it's a nickname.
you truly are. I love this bell symbology already coming in too, because yeah, you really are a uh, sounding out kind of unique frequencies and really kind of an extraordinary part of your medicine. And I'd love to kind of give a more specific introduction to those who don't know you. Nicole is an intuitive astrologer, and she brings a really unique perspective to this space. Her cosmological musings include unifying the separation between astronomy and astrology. So she weaves both traditional tropical astrology as well as true sky sidereal 13, kind of true sky astrology, which you can speak into, to assist the recalibration of the birth code at a molecular level. And her expertise resides in the evolutionary cycles, soul contracts, archetypes, and as well as intuiting astrological systems. And she has a BA in early developmental psychology, and she's also worked as a counselor for nearly a decade. And her approach is truly soul-centered, as well as evolutionary and psychologically based. She's also offering her second round of her course, The Cosmic Clock, which is an evolutionary midlife circle, which I was so gifted to go through the first round of that and cannot recommend that enough. So I feel like we will definitely get into some of those midlife codes in our conversation here. But welcome. Thank you for being here, Nicole.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited.
Me too. Yeah. I mean, I love just this moment to kind of reflect on your medicine. One, I've um, I've sought your counsel in many different kind of moments of my life, going through separation, moving homes, all of these kind of pivotal moments, and then most recently, going through your midlife course. And I feel like what's truly drawn me to your transmission is the way that you orient to cycles of time. And you seem to have um, and now I'm saying the ums all the time. No, we talked about it before. We're like, don't say
Don't say don't say I wrote
It's
it down.
well,
Don't say No ums.
I know, but it is
It's gonna happen.
it's centering us in that sweet Ma energy. But yeah, I was just thinking about this. I'm like, what is Nicole like? Can I even say she's an astrologer? Because there's so much more
Right.
to how what you bring through. And yeah, I just have this like vision of you as this kind of like timekeeper, but it's like a timekeeper on this celestial like lattices of time. So it's like the greater cycles of aeons and ages, and that there's like a distilling through of these larger themes that feel so very ancient and yet are so needed at this time as we kind of like, the veils of forgetting thin and we come into this kind of like um, beginning stages of collective remembrance. And I'm curious, like, where you would place us, I guess, as I kind of search for purposefulness in this time of like great suffering and, personal and collective, like it always helps me to kind of orient within these greater cycles of time and go like, where am I? Locate myself. What
Mhm.
is my purpose? What is my greater cosmological purpose? What am I here to do? And so it's always like soothing to my soul to kind of like nestle into your transmissions because they give me that sense of real purposefulness and with relation to these greater cycles. And I'm curious if you could kind of, yeah, share a little bit of, yeah, where are we collectively? Like, what are the collective energies that are present, and like, how are we uniquely attuning to them? I know that's a like a big winding question, but I'm sure.
Yeah, it's a big winding question and almost like, oh, we want to go here now. Like, we're gonna start with this. Well, first of all, thank you for that reflection of a timekeeper. Um, I don't know if that's exactly the word that you chose, but I feel the energetic and I highly resonate with that. I had asked you before, of course, you were going to read my bio, but I wanted to ask you, ladies, in reflection, how do you see the work that I do? Because it is highly valuable to me to see, especially just being seen and noticed. And also, I hope that I offer a sense of calm and depth to current experience that it's a grander we're operating on a grander scale of the cosmos, and wherever we've traveled, wherever we've been, we are here at a wild juncture, a beautiful juncture, a very purposeful juncture, and but it's something that we have been preparing for eons. And so I really love to work with the patterns of time. And even though, like currently I'm taking lots of pauses on my Instagram page and kind of the work that I'm doing. Yes, I'm doing current offerings, but I am sort of taking pauses. Um, and yeah, it's because there's a lot coming through now that we are operating with and on, and this is that crux point. So yeah, I appreciate that reflection.
I feel like your pauses, like we were talking about this before you hit record as well, the kind of like digital space and the movement of frequency through these denser fields. But like I feel like I always see your posts. Like whenever you do post, like without a doubt, I will like see your posts. And so there is this kind of like greater assistance that is available, I think. Like we have this, impulse to produce and to create income streams for ourselves and to, engage in this type of productive activity consistently. So I love that you shared that you're taking a pause and yet you own a thriving business. And so just to anyone to know that that's possible to honor your own impulses, your holy impulses, and still reach the people that you're meant to reach effectively.
Yeah. Yeah, and you got to trust that as well, because and during all my pauses, I am working constantly on the cosmic clock, on the essence of time. There's so much that comes through my field. And, I have notes galore, I have math galore, I have patterns galore that I see, but I don't share everything. And so I trust that I'm working beyond time, I'm working beyond space. And when I do put something forward, I do put something out, I've probably felt a lot of pressure to speak. But also it might have just been fluid at that right time. And I just trust that those who feel that, understand that that's how I operate, that I want to be in my feminine, I want to be in my tribal self. There's nothing rushed, there's nothing pushed, especially if it's sacred,
Mm.
you know. And I could produce all the time, and I have before, and it takes up a lot of mental capacity. So, and a lot of, especially speaking to Instagram, a lot of that gnosis is free. And so for the feminine energy to give so much freely and then not being able to support or sustain yourself, while maybe working in a more construct of the capitalistic world, it's like whatever you produce is paid for. So giving right time and right space and right length and energy so that, of course, honoring mental health, honoring the earth, grounding back in. Um, but yeah, also keeping it sacred.
Could
That's
you
so
tell?
cool.
Oh, you go ahead, Sheena.
Okay. Um,
Mhm.
I like where you went with that because I do want to share the reflection I have. I only know
I was
you.
going to ask you.
Yeah.
I'm like, I know Alyssa very well. And yeah, we're just officially talking and communicating. And I was so curious what your interpretation was about what it is I do.
Yeah. Okay. So because I only know you through Instagram and we haven't connected in the same way as Alyssa, what I see is, and part of this is, how I use social media personally. Um, Coming from a position of feeling really isolated in my experience, like we talked a little bit before we pressed record around like needing or wanting other people to talk about this kind of stuff with, to really go into the quantum and not having that in my world, in my physical reality. So connecting in with social media, I wasn't before. Like as like a millennial, I was the weird one who wasn't doing that kind of thing. Um, according to the people I was around. So it doesn't matter so much. But I just coming in and having that decision, like I'm going to connect with the collective in this way. And so I'll have really clear energetic hygiene in that space. So whenever someone new would come in, like a post would be shared, it shows up in the feed. When yours first came in, I had this image and I found my notebook to find it like earlier because this was a couple of years ago. So I wanted to make sure I got the image right. But I saw one of your posts and I think it had like the Merkaba kind of in the background and you were overlaying true sky and tropical charts, but then talking about something that you wouldn't normally expect that. It was very philosophical. It was very like um deep in with the body as well. And I was just like, this is amazing. And so the image that came through was like a water droplet filled with stars dropping down into the earth and then coming back up. And your words were like weaving together something that was etheric, but it was available if you're willing to see it. And that's kind of how I see your work. And I don't know if that's a very tangible thing to say, but it's almost like you're kind of taking, I like that we go into like the cosmic clock or the life cycle with the stars and all of that, because I feel like you're weaving a lot
Mhm.
together.
Mhm.
And it is for the people who are meant to see it, who can see that whether the mind understands it or not. There
Mhm.
is through your work, the energetics, the information can bypass the mind and it can
Mhm.
become embodied if you're
Mhm.
willing to work with it. And you're like reflecting that on Instagram to the collective. And it's powerful.
I need like a recording of that and like take that and hold that in my pocket. Yeah, just thank you so much for that reflection. And I feel very seen. And that's exactly what is moving through my body. There's so much information that moves through my body. And when I think it's going to be one thing that's coming through, as soon as I tap into it, it opens up even further and it starts showing me more and more and more because that's how complex and how beautiful the quanta is. And it's moving, it's weaving. There's an architecture, there's a creation, there's an art to that. And it weaves art and science. And so to then put that in a tiny box on Instagram is like, what?
Yeah.
Which I also appreciate that sort of strange prison, to kind of break into it, break out of it, to, put it through a lens. It's kind of like yeah, like a little game I like to play. Um, but yeah, it's an interesting relationship then to have that, you know.
Yeah. Sort of like seeding the collective. And that's just kind of the box that we're talking about is just the place you plant the seed. And then when others receive it, it spreads.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm. It's cool.
And I think what we were talking before is like when I'm ready, it's like I'll have so much coming forward and I could talk about so much. And in part, I feel like I'm preparing my body for that. I feel like there is going to be a time when I really let myself go and I'm going to have a sort of a bigger container and I want to share more of myself. But at this point, it's still sort of private. It's still sort of I'm moving with it. I'm seeing how, um, yeah, how it comes through the ether and out. And if I want that to be the expression, so I'm constantly playing with expressions because there's something that's seen in the ether, but it's so hard to materialize sometimes. And so it takes a lot of energy. And so, yeah, I appreciate that sort of trickle, the water coming up, the water coming down, because that's what it feels like.
I love that you shared, Sheena, too, about the ability of Nicole's philosophical musings to reach the body directly,
Mm.
like without like the mind is there. But I feel like, at least in my personal experience, I don't have to immediately understand everything in the, traditional sense. There's a direct transmission. And so I love this as a wider invitation to women, people who are listening to this, who have gifts that are unusual, that have not been, there's no template, there's no one doing what you do, but to drop into that trust and to share in the way that you feel that, yeah, that readiness to share and to allow it to come through in ways that are unusual, because those are the exact ways that people are longing to be ministered to and to be shared with. And so I love that, like, kind of just noting the way that these things can move, even when they're holding these like really complex geometries. And I'm really curious, Nicole, to when did you connect with astrology as a means for kind of housing your larger impulse to understand and, yeah, play with these cosmic energies?
Yeah. So this was sort of the question that I was hoping maybe we could tackle first, before we get into the energetics of now, because I feel like so much of my work, um, it's hard to to state it, but I'm going to state it respectfully, is that a lot of what I've come into now and how I see things has been earned through experience.
Mm.
I didn't, it wasn't like a magical thing that happened, this magical download, or, I saw my core energetics and I was able to then articulate that. No, this was like, I was brought to several sort of life experiences that showed me who I was, why I'm here, and it wasn't it wasn't easy. And so when I bring through the things that I see, it's because I've created a relationship with patterns. And so I always want to exude that in everything that I do, that there's something behind even what I'm saying. There's always like this bigger thing behind what I'm saying. And so how I came into astrology was like middle school, I was into astrology. I think like my third grade mom, she was the first person that sort of brought in this conceptual idea of what astrology is. And she was like, "Oh, you're a Pisces. Are you messy under the bed?" And I, my little third grade self was like, "What? What is that? What is Pisces? And am I messy under the bed?" And she was like, "Well, my daughter's a Pisces," which was my best friend. This was her mom. She was just like, "Well, she's messy under the bed." And, so it's sort of been like a part of my sort of play and sharing and friendship. But it wasn't until I hit my Saturn return that, which started around 26 for me. So the typical apex point is 29, 30, but for me, it hit super early and it was a long, dragged out Saturn return. Um, and so at the time I finished my bachelor's degree in psychology, and then I began working with disenfranchised youth in a trauma-informed therapeutic center, outreach center. And so I had a caseload of 50 young adults, and I worked with crisis and crisis intervention in varying states of trauma. And so, right at where the adolescent is at that, in my opinion, at that buttery time of they're able to articulate and express frustration. They're exploring themselves, and then they're meeting the world. They're meeting the greater world at large, and right before they're adults. And so I really loved working with rebels, revolutionaries. I would always offer to take those kids on because, we would sit in circle and, okay, we have this youth coming, who wants to work with them? And we'd sort of get like a play-by-play of what was going on for them. And it seemed to be the case I would always take on kind of the rebel because I always understood myself to be kind of rebellious. And I felt like I had a lot of share and a lot of open arms to receive their divine leadership. I saw it as divine leadership, where a lot of the world was trying to squash it and trying to put them in a box. And so I was always, I'll take them. And so, yeah, I had a lot of wild experiences through that. And at that same time, I was in an abusive relationship. Not here to pathologize or diagnose, but some might say a narcissistic abusive relationship. And that was happening at the same time that put me into a crisis point, an energetic crisis point, a state of emergency, which brought me back to my youth because this wasn't the first time I've experienced abuse. My upbringing, there was a lot of crazy, wild interactions and abuse, which I might share. All of these stories, I'm always wondering, will I share all these stories at greater length because it's such a wild story. Um, and so, yeah, so I came to an emergency point within my body where I had an abrupt Kundalini awakening, and it brought me into states of the ether, where I was pressed up against time. I felt my body pressed up against the division of earth and space. And I was being told basically to exit my body. I was basically being told that I should kill myself. And also in receiving that from my ex-partner, basically. So I then came into contact with dark entities, started to begin to really understand the victimizer programming. And yeah, so that was that. And this was all during my Saturn return. So this state of emergency brought me into a split of consciousness, where what I call it, my brain split apart. It was like I had been living with sort of an understanding of light and dark and right and wrong. And then once it split, it was like I could see everything. I saw the details, and my Saturn's in Virgo. So everybody knows the tiny little details of everything. It was like I was looking at matter in a brand new way. And the thing that gave me peace at that time, was astrology. And it showed me, yeah, I think I was, at the crux of experience and all this, and I met a girl, a friend, and she was like, "Oh, can I read your birth chart?" Because she was playing with it. And she started to read my chart, and it just was something in me just sort of opened up and expanded. And I'm like, I have to know more about this. And then I just soaked it all up. I mean, it was a high learning point for me, and I absorbed so much. And so that is the basis of my gnosis. Um, and that gave me, of course, a foundation of the tropical system. So I was learning about the tropical system at that time. But because of what I experienced, and I was being introduced into the conspiratorial realms in many ways. So, like I said, this is a deeper story that, yeah, who knows when I'll share the depth of that. But, a lot of things that people weren't talking. So the things that people talk about now, essentially, this dark entities and essay ritual abuse and all of that, the control of the planet. So I was coming into contact with that in 2010 in complete isolation. Nobody was talking about this. And so I had to, it was hard for me to even talk to people. Um, and I thought that what's happening now, I thought that that was going to happen then. So I feel like I've been waiting, waiting. And so when 2020 hit, I was like, let's go. It's go time. I'm ready. I've been ready. Let's talk about this. And then my astrology morphed into, because I was familiar with conspiratorial realms, into the truth. What is the truth? There's something not being expressed here. There's a falsity. There's a strange ritual going on. I'm seeing that. Yes, this is an entry point, but there's something deeper there. And so then that started my trajectory with processional time, the precession of the equinoxes, true time, the divorce of astronomy and astrology, and regaining that power and that wisdom of geometry and resonance, and bringing that back into time now. And all of this was happening, it was like spirit prepping me for all of this. And then what I'm seeing now in the collective, it's like, oh, okay, okay. I understand why I've been prepping for this, and I can see what is going on with the time clock currently. So, yeah, that's a long-winded story of how I came into astrology. But it was the one thing that gave me a lot of peace, and it supported um, it brought a lot of compassion for myself and compassion for others. And it deepened so my trauma-informed background, it deepened that as to why we might be here on a soul level. What are the archetypes we're working out? Why are we functioning the way that we're functioning? What is our birth code? What is our familial line? What are the familial patterns? And why? What's going on here? Why are we here? Why are we doing this? So a lot of those questions sort of spark my continued investigation, my continued research, and bringing it in about in a sort of philosophical way, because it's all theory. It's all a wild ride. And so, yeah, I'm always playing with the parts of expression and how I talk about it. So,
Thank you for sharing with such, yeah, tenderness and detail about the actual, like coming into, the, yeah, the gnosis that you have. And, I think that, being present to the templates of trauma that can be these openings to psychic initiation, spiritual initiation is it does feel a little bit like hard to talk about because it's we don't want to equate trauma with as like the only way to the only manner into yeah, creating these psychic openings. But there is purposefulness to the ways in which we encounter violence. And I think that you sharing your story helps me to greater integrate the purposefulness of some of the, and at the same time to hold in view that we are dealing with that the place and time that we are is to experience the contrast of both like the fully righted kind of heavenly templating that we're drawing in, while also understanding the ways that these have been inverted in like truly
Hmm.
horrific ways. And we're
Yeah.
holding both. And I definitely feel that and see that in the way that you transmit. So thank you for sharing that kind of, yeah, deeper story about how you came into utilizing astrology as a way to mend these realities and to yeah, to create wholeness or to witness the wholeness,
Yeah.
as well as and to hold the deep separation.
Yeah, I appreciate that a lot. Um, Trying to think about how you articulated that, but being pressed up against time, being pressed up against trauma, and then having that being related to a spiritual awakening. And it feels like a Saturnian program. And of course, I was experiencing all this during my Saturn return. And so I do not fully abide to in order to receive spiritual awakenings, we need to experience so much compression and evil and contrast. Um, but I also understand contrast and sacred contrast, um, and sacred pressurized entities. But I also believe in the sort of 1% evil threads
Mhm.
that run through the consciousness where there's nothing you can do about it. And that's something that was taught to me as I was working with light, dark, and the other. And then negotiating where those things actually are, how do they play, um, and how that works in the quanta and the fabric of time and what we're doing here. And so, yeah, I really appreciate you sort of picking up on that, and articulating that because that is a huge part of something that I'm constantly weaving. It's like I will talk about the dark, but I hope that you're seeing also that I'm talking about evil dark and I'm also talking about sacred dark. If I'm not, if at all, like expressing it in detail, because sometimes it's so enigmatic. It's so hard to talk about. And also sometimes it's not something that's taught. Like you have to live it, you have to see it, you have to breathe it, you have to feel it. And that's how we come into relationship with it so that we can actually unify the collective duality and why we're here actually at this time is to unify this sort of dualistic problem. Um, so yeah.
Your story also helps to kind of bring to the center when you were mentioning about this, your work is very embodied. It's brought to you through experience. And so sharing a little bit about even just, quite respectfully, little details of how you have come into the wisdom and the way that you do communicate all that's moving through you on your terms when you are ready as best you can. And I think that there's it's really powerful and it can be very isolating. I know in my own experience, I also have had little bits along the way in my life that have seemed very, very dark. But through that, there's so much. And so I don't really have anything more to say, but your story that you just shared felt to me like there's an inner child is like seen and like, yeah, I just kind of get it and appreciate you for sharing.
Mhm. Yeah, and in that way, I don't feel like I'm unique. I feel like a lot of us have experienced some, dark experiences, some trauma. But yeah, perhaps I'm just like a vessel for that. And the way that I experience trauma, I could get into it another time. It's like another time, but it's just so wild. Like when I think back and I look upon it, and as I mentioned, I don't feel like I'm unique. I know there's definitely people out there. Um, but there is a point in why I share it. It's a part of a mission. It's a part of a sacred contract, a soul contract that I am still uncovering. And I will do it as long as it moves through my body. So,
It reminds me of something that my grandmother said to my sister and I when we had um, both experienced something quite traumatic. She had said to us both, with her religious programming, God doesn't give you anything you cannot handle.
mhm.
And to my older sister, the way that that message played out in her life was entirely different from
Mhm.
myself. And for me, I thought, then that means I'm smarter than this. Then
Mhm.
that means I can find a way through. And and so I tried. I tried to understand what was happening. I tried to move through it. And because of that, I got a lot of experience in that processing and recognizing patterns and seeing, how to also, I'm also a Pisces, right? How to swim through the
Mhm.
things and find a way home back to myself. And I feel that astrology can help us with that.
Mhm.
I Yeah, I don't know if this is a good point to maybe even ask a question, but I love the idea of, rather than saying no to tropical or yes to tropical, like rather than pulling them apart, like, which I guess they kind of are, but bringing them together and
Mhm.
weaving them and seeing how each of those can bless us and provide for us on the map. It's really
Mhm.
interesting.
Mhm. Is there a question? Did I
Yeah,
miss a question?
you did not miss a question. I wonder how you got into weaving those together and what has was there like a moment for you where you're like, oh, these together, that's amazing. I don't know how to frame that question more, but did you have like an aha moment with the two of them, or was it just over time?
Yeah, I think just over time, and I'm big on not disregarding things. And I'm big on being a bridge. So we're gonna, if that is an old system, if it is an outdated matrix, the tropical system, because it was created during the Dark Ages, it was created during the Egyptian invasion timelines, it was created during the Silver Gate, the Age of Taurus. So it was a high sort of hijacking, and the creation of Babylonia. And I think that astrology systems were created eons before, and there's sacred astrology, but I feel like there was some sort of takeover with those archetypes. And so that is the system that we have now, and especially since 2020, a lot of people have been leaning to astrology more, which I identify myself in because when you go through trauma or you're seeing a lot of new things that you haven't experienced before, I understand you lean into spiritual stuff to get a sense of why. What's the greater reason? What's the greater point? So I think that more people are getting into astrology. So then it's building up the matrix even more than before. And so instead of just disregarding and saying, no, that's not true, let's focus on true sky. I want to be, I want to show that there's an access point of because I do believe that when we come into body, we understand that there's a matrix here. There's a strange matrix. That's why we came into body. That's why we're here. So I think that we understand that we're here to, and maybe some of us more so than others, we're here to uh, expand upon it, break curses, you know, uh, just change some things. So I don't believe in disregarding it. And so how I see the tropical system and true sky is sort of like a top down. And It's like we might feel the tropical system maybe more. It's the one that's talking to us more. It's how our body is sort of pushed forward, or, our family might be pressurizing us because there is this sort of karmic tie to the tropical system. There's this sort of generational strange blood that's through that system. So, but what's underneath and what's at the core is the true birth code energetics of True Sky. It cannot be disputed of where the sun actually is and in what constellation. And it has everything to do with the belly of the earth and where she is orchestrating herself and how we receive and what is our relationship with the cosmos and the earth. Um, and so the earth as well is experiencing her own constellation and her own constellation signatures, and we receive that as well. And so, yeah, so I work with both of how is this operating in your body? What does that feel like? And how I view True Sky is that I believe that our baby selves, our child selves, felt that expression more. And then we move through the adult stages, we might feel the tropical system more. And then in our elder selves, I believe that we feel more back in tune with our baby True Sky selves. But during this adult mid stage, um, it's aligned to the progressed astrology chart. So we in astrology, there's something called progressions, and it's basically kind of like a processional influence of how the sun might move signs. So if you were born, if you were born a Pisces, you might be in your Aries sun stage, which could connect then to, like the tropical system. And so we feel that moving forward energy because it is a moving forward energy. Um, and yeah, and our adult selves are kind of aligned to that. How do we move forward? How do we be productive? Where's our mission? And so it's a very move forward energy. Um, but the true resonance is backwards. It's one step backwards. And that's what sign that you really are, is one step backwards. Where the baby self and the elder self is sort of, in their more of dissolving states. They're closer to the ethers. They aren't maybe so worried about having to live out their mission. I guess, based on typical evolutionary cycles. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. And I was, as you're speaking, I was just remembering that recently I was like looking at my True Sky chart, and I had this overwhelming like breath of like I felt more relaxed in even just looking at it. I just felt a lot more relaxed, like as if there's this other instinct, right? That is kind of gently guiding me to operate in another way that actually feels more true. It feels easier on the body. It feels more kind, even in my mind, in my mental state. But there is that resistance because there is pressure. There's still pressure from this other matrix. And so I see you're weaving with these two as like releasing tension and deepening our understanding. Here's a program, whether it is true for you or not, like ultimately, as in like your core blueprint, it is a patterning that is in your field. So what if instead of rejecting that, we understand it and lift it a little?
Exactly. Yeah, because I believe that on a soul level, we've come to Earth and we understand that there's a strange matrix here. A part of our code is then in that strange matrix so that we can rewrite those patterns. So it's like, for example, if you're a Gemini rising, it's like you might feel very flighty, very chatty, a little bit, sort of rising above into that earth energy, might be slender, it's like very bouncy of an energy. But when you get into the true birth code of Taurus rising, which is one behind, which is the true code, it's more earth-based, it's more calm, it's more steady, steadfast. It's not as like fast and energetic. And so it's nice to feel into that true energetic of maybe where you were when you were born. Like, ah, there I am. When did it get so anxious? When did it get so flighty? You know? But then working with that rising, so say for example, yeah, if it's Gemini, it's like we can then use that to our ability. It's like we can calm that energy down. We can look at those false energetics, especially because the rising rises pretty fast in the body. We tend to even overutilize our rising sign. And so it's like calming that down and then also utilizing it. So it's like you can be a writer if you want, you can be a speaker if you want, utilizing it to the best of your ability. Because, you know, it's like it's owning the matrix. It's like, all right, this matrix is upon me instead of it being a curse. Like how I came into this form understanding, you know, like where am I and how could I utilize this energy? It's like if you're a true Pisces or if you're a Pisces, but you're a true Aquarius, it's like you might feel all the swimmy fields, you might sponge the collective. And then or Aquarius is a little bit more distant, a little bit more cold. It's very humanitarian, but it's more sort of intellectual than emotional. And so tapping into, okay, well, I love my Pisces side. I love my dreamer side, the fantasy. But wow, I'm pretty emotional. You know, I feel all these things. Oh my gosh, it's a lot to be a sponge. How can I use that to the best of my ability and express poetry and speak in poetry while honoring that true code, which is like, wow, it's this divine technology. And what does that really mean for me when I just drop into the Aquarian energy? So that's, you know, you can take that for all of your placements in your chart. Just drop it back one, just drop it back one, calm the body, and then see how you can move forward with the energetic of the false matrix.
It's a really fun place to play in. I
Yeah.
recommend everyone do it.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, and I love the Piscean dreamy stuff, as you said. Of course, I love that. But what this has done for me is recognize all of those times when actually I could take a step back. There's an off switch for the absorption,
Mhm.
and I could take a step back, even if in some kind of like intense encounter or intense conflict, I could step back and witness what was going on and then speak just to the energetics of what was happening without consuming another person's like emotions or being captivated by them. And it's an interesting that thing that happens in the mind when you notice you can do that and you start playing with it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so cool.
Yeah. I love that.
Well, I love that you spoke to your earlier to your Saturn return as being a pivotal moment in your evolutionary recognition of your gifts and your challenges. And I know we have quite a few listeners who are in that space. And I know as we have the popularization of astrology, I do hear people referring to their Saturn return as like happening within like the space of the day, like on their solar return day,
Hmm.
you know, being like, well, it's over now. I'm like,
Hmm.
but and so I'd love for you to
Yeah.
speak to like, you know, what is a typical duration and what can people expect during that time? What are the gifts of that time? And what are some thrival codes for people who are moving through that pressurized portal, specifically the Saturn return?
Yeah, that's right. You did ask me in a separate email. You're like, I want to talk about Saturn, but I completely forgot. Um, yeah, so I would say that if you are a sensitive soul, and it might be exposed to you if you're a sensitive soul or not, um, I believe that the Saturn return window is 25, 26 until 33 to 35. Um, and yes, the crux point is 2930. So it's not, you know, that short window and, oh, I went through it. It's over. Now I can breathe. Now I can live. It's a whole series of integration and spirit speaking to you through a lot of lessons. Um, and so, yeah. So Yeah, what can I share? Um, yeah, so uh I guess it's interesting to weave the true and the false, because we're talking about Saturn. We're talking about the Saturn matrix. Um, and so there's going to be lessons that are pure, and there's going to be lessons that are unsavory and not necessarily aligned to your ascension path, but almost utilizes trickery. Um, and like I said, if you're a sensitive soul, you might experience that. Maybe for the average person, it's like they might experience Saturn in a different way. It might just be that crux point. It might be something, um, yeah, that they're just having to make a few movements. I don't know. I identify it very intensely, obviously, and I really love to support people through that intense process. But I find it to be the recognition, that evolutionary pattern, the recognition of the soul breaking itself away from the familial line. Not forever, not, we still have contracts, but it seems to be like a direct severing of, the family that you grew up in and the family that you're then creating on your own without anybody's say. So there's a separation point and almost like an emergency that happens of, oh my gosh, I didn't realize that's what happened to me in my upbringing. Oh my gosh, I didn't realize that's who my mom really was. You start to see things more clearly and you start to have a lot more questions about how you grew up. Um, and it's nothing to be, like I said, planned for. Like I thought I understood my family at 23. I thought I was breaking out. I'm done with that, never see it again. And then when I hit my Saturn return, it became very real viscerally in my body. And so it's nothing really to intellectualize anymore. It's like the spirit wants to show you exactly how it's affected you. What are your soul contracts? What are you then doing with your mission moving forward? So a lot of people will feel the mission of what am I doing with my life? How do I make a living? Sort of those basic family, partner, a lot of those things might come up. Um, but I would say it's deeper than that. It means something deeper. And so there might be an emergency to do those things, but definitely take your time because it's there's a lot coming through during that window. And I believe that every evolutionary cycle is getting you to know yourself, your own DNA, who you are, why you're here. So with every evolutionary cycle, listen, 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 listen. Write, get a dream journal. That's one thing that especially during Saturn and a good portion of the midlife transits, watch your dreams. Write about your dreams. You're getting a lot of messages. If not in the everyday life, you'll get them in the dream world. So, and it's time you will want to go back and look at because how the time clock works, you're building upon something. And so you'll want to know what you were doing at that time and what was coming through because it will give you information at the time clocks moving forward. And if you don't have that sort of recipe of what you were moving through and you're like, I think that's what happened, I'm not really sure, then it might be harder to sort of understand when you move through your midlife or your secondary Saturn return at 60.
Do you hold these transition points? So like every decade we have this kind of opportunity to confront ourselves newly within these cycles of time. So specifically, for people who were like myself, like deeply asleep or like engaged in activities, I was like taking Xanax and having 3 cocktails every night and working like, like I was just very much like overextended and numbing out during a lot of that time, not the whole time, but that was like kind of what I was doing at that time. I definitely wasn't dream journaling. And but
Yeah.
I still feel that there is um there's stuff to excavate in that time period. So just for reference,
Yeah.
like I'm in my midlife portal now, which is, another kind of what feels to me as like this other opportunity to go, okay, there are things that I didn't finish there.
Mhm.
And there is a little bit more ease of accessing some of the sediment there and clearing it away,
Mhm.
um, at this point. So I feel like I'd love to hear you speak into kind of the ways that we can utilize these times of transformation, I feel like, well, I'd love to hear you speak into what each of those, like, it feels like there's almost like, yeah, transition, trans, transmutation, transfiguration. There's like a
Mhm.
scaling up of like what's possible in each of these moments, but we didn't miss, like, can you speak to like people who feel like they've missed the boat on like doing the work during
Yeah.
those times, like what's accessible for them?
Yeah, I mean, I guess first and foremost, you got to give grace for how the body is processing the information, and how it copes. So there's no wrong way, to do it. If you completely wanted to eject from your body during that time, that's totally okay and understandable. There's so much compassion for that. And perhaps there's answers to that. Perhaps there's answers, on a past life scale, an ancient scale, as to why that was the case. And so, um, if that does happen, of course, there's always time. Spirit supports always.
Mhm.
And so, perhaps if that didn't happen during the Saturn return, that person might also receive information, initiations after that. I mentioned that the Saturn return lasts probably until 33, the Christed year. And then within those 2 years, there's a lot of movement happening because there's a lot of choice points about what that new energetic, because at each evolutionary point, there's light that's entering the field of the body, the chakras. And so it then is receiving that information and then it's deciding what it's going to do with that information, whether we do it correctly, if we're hearing right. It's all about interpretation, so it's hard. We're getting messages, and so you really got to give grace to the earthbound body trying to receive those messages, trying to understand. And so spirit, I believe, always gives grace in that. And you're doing your best. So doing the best at the time with the tools that you were given. And so trusting that, potentially it happened after. There might have been transits encoded within your field. Maybe you knew that on a soul level. You weren't really gonna wake up during that time, or you sort of slept through it, or you drink. There's addictions that started at that time. Um, and, potentially soul encoded you with different transits at different times to wake up. So you might be then out of time and you might experience that out of timeness. And so, with the cosmic clock of the natural evolution of how the planetary bodies work, that all of us collectively go through, we also have our own brand of transits that are activated at those specific times or after those specific times to then support that internal clock. And that is completely personal. And so it's like, while I can talk about the collective influences, it's still going to be a very personal dial up and dial into, dial down, whatever you want to, however the dial works. Um, and so, yeah, what was your question about, uh, what was your question about the series of evolutionary cycles? Did I
Oh,
answer
yeah.
it?
Just I think you spoke into it. But what is accessible to us as we kind of, we hit that third our 30s, we hit our 40s, we hit our 50s, we hit
Mhm.
our 60s. There's like these points at which we can reckon with what has not been confronted, what has not been integrated. Um, and just how you understand the progression of, I guess maybe maybe it's an invitation to the next one. So like what are the character what are the characteristics of the midlife Uranus opposition, like what's all going on in there? Because it's a lot and directly related to this beautiful yeah, super information packed, but also very supportive to the emotional body and to that kind of sister kinship that can be, so nutritive during this time. But yeah, could you speak into a little bit of what we could find within that container, but also just, generally to the potency of that midlife transition point?
Yeah, so what I'm offering this summer, basically the end of May is the sign up time, but I'm offering my second midlife course. It's something that I really love. I have put a lot of heart into it. I really connect to it. Um, and I have a lot of fun. I love connecting with women in the same age group that are moving and going through similar things. And also hearing directly from the source, how are you feeling? What are you moving through? Because it can happen and feel differently for each person. But there is sort of like this collective feeling. And with the midlife transits, we're meeting the outer planets. So we're meeting the outer spheres of time, and it's basically waking up our wisdom selves. So while Saturn returned, we were sort of dissolving and creating our own energetic orb of who we are. The midlife transits are the introduction into our wisdom selves, our elder selves, how we're going to sort of transition into the later stages of life. And hopefully that by that point, we've created our own orb, our own field. And so if we haven't, there's just going to be things that are going to come back up from the Saturn return. And most likely they will come up. We might think that we did it. We're like, yeah, we created our own orb. But Spirit will tell you, nope, not here, not here, not here. And so it's not like gate opening, closing. It's like this sort of dissolving process that just sort of moves through time and whatever the soul and the body is prepared for. And so sometimes you'll just get little doses of what you can handle. So yeah, the midlife juncture to me is a time to get really authentic, true with yourself. Another time to listen. You must listen. Because if there isn't listening, there's then restriction and then trying to control the process, which makes it a lot more challenging. And so being that receptive vessel to receive and hear, there's a lot of hearing and listening during these windows because spirit has a greater plan. We might think we know, but then we're sort of brought to this realization point, oh my God, maybe I don't know anything at all. And so I think during the midlife, there's a lot of questions about self and trajectory and what is it that we have been building and does it still align with our mission? So some people might get rid of it all, move into a different path. Some people are deciding what should go, what should stay. But there's sort of like an energetic fireball that comes up in the Kundalini and it's rising and it's wanting to move through the field so that it can sort of bounce back into the higher states because these are the wisdom states. Um, and and so that's a process then because then we're dealing with stuck points in our cord, in our Kundalini cord. And so listening to those stuck points so that then we can release. But Alyssa, you took my class, so I'm curious what you felt from that container.
I felt just one, it was so beautifully timed, like we were talking about earlier. Just like my spirit was calling out for support. I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm going through something
Yeah.
and this is wild, this is different. What is this? And I think that's really powerful. One, to like acknowledge that, because I think we can kind of collapse into these, I should be able to do it myself kind
Yeah.
of stories. And so I had relented and accepted that like I needed help, I needed support. And it was like, oh, Nicole's doing a midlife thing. And I think maybe I'd even reached out to you just for a session because I was struggling and uh was like, are you doing it? I feel like there was just perfect harmonization of like when your offering came out to like what my heart was calling for. And so it was so beautifully orienting because you provide such an incredible field of acceptance. I feel like that's one of your gifts as well, is that you show up with deep um, grace for all of the permutations of consciousness that are moving through. And so that was felt in the field. And I got to meet with women who were going through the same thing. So there was that element of just, showing up and having communion, which with
Yeah.
women going through the exact same thing with that intention, and like that in itself is extraordinarily powerful. But then coupled with the like extensive tools, which I'm still like have not fully integrated because they're so extensive, so beautifully designed and laid out, like the care that you put into creating these um repositories of information that is so complex about our charts, both our tropical and our true sky
Yeah.
charts, and like how everything's lining out, where we are at exactly in our cycles, our internal cycles. And it's just there's so much information to delve into and to be supportive during times. Like it's literally like I need to print it out and put it in a binder so I can like more easily reference it because it is kind of like a guide to midlife, you know,
Hmm.
and a personalized one. So yeah, yeah, maybe I should jump in again.
Yeah, there's a lot
Hyping
to
myself up.
Yeah, there's a lot to explore. And like I said, each person is encoded differently. When I open up the container and whatever souls are attracted to the circle, I then dive into each person and I'm saying what's exactly going on for that person. And it's just so wild, even within the group of similar years, how it can move and operate differently. It's like one person might have a whole bunch of Pluto influences coming up during that time. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this person is really going to move through power struggle or power issues and how they invigorate their own power during this time. So that's going to be like this main force for them within the field of a midlife transit. Well, somebody else, it's like there might be a lot of Venus transit. So it's like, okay, there's like this beautifying, there's relationship stuff coming up. And so, yeah, it's just really wild to then tap into energetics with that. And then also, uh, certain contracts for that time period. It's like somebody might have their Pluto in not even a constellation that of the 12. It might be a different constellation. It might be in, I think for our class, there was a few people who had Pluto in Boots. So
Mm,
the constellation Boots where Arcturus is. And so that gives a different lens of what that soul contract is. And then the groups moving forward, like the 1990 group that's like coming up, they're going to be highly Plutonian. They have some heavy Pluto contracts. And so it's just going to be really fascinating. I imagine the course morphing however it needs to and however it should. Um, but yeah, you gave me chills like all over my body because you were saying, just like, the feeling of I can do this on
mm,
my own. And especially you've entered your fourth decade of life. You're in your 40s. You're like, "Ugh, I know so much by now. I should be able to know this. I should be able to deal with this on my own. I've lived through the Saturn return. I've lived through my teenage years. It's like, I get it, but there's this sort of new feeling that feels different, and you don't know how to then connect and express what exactly is going on in the
yeah.
body. And so, Yeah, I just found it highly valuable. And I always find it highly valuable to sort of settle the energy and come together so that we can all collectively say, no, we're not going crazy. This is real. What does it feel like? And we're doing it together. And how are you absorbing it in your system? And everybody has a different language to express that same energy, which I always find fascinating. And where one person's having a hard time articulating it, another person might articulate it in a way that's like, aha, there
Yeah.
it is.
Yeah, and you get a like a close up view of kind of what's coming as well, because everyone's just kind of ends up perfectly oriented in this kind of like, oh, I might be meeting something similar. And so then when you meet it, you have some context through that shared, feminine wisdom that feels so like we're all collectively craving those sharing circles. So I love the combination of that, like, extraordinarily um encoded content with our personal charts, and just yeah, I'm so excited to continue utilizing that, but coupled with the kind of like freedom to be with what is and to share it, in a space that is designed for it. So
Yeah, and especially as women, we're coming into contact with the perimenopausal phase. So there's a lot of resistance to that. Like, really? Am I entering my midlife? No. Am I
yeah.
going through premenopause? No. I'm still a young soul. That's for later. But we are starting to get feelings of that. It's not yet there, but we're getting feelings of that. We're prepping the body for it. We have to understand what that's going to look like so that when that does happen, we'll be more ready, because it is a beautiful initiation. But so much of the culture, there's a lot of fear around aging. There's a lot of fear about, it's like, okay, we don't want to have our periods anymore, but then we do because it's a signature of youth, and the body's changing. And so I just think it's highly valuable to then share that wisdom with other women, so that it's normalized and it's real. There's no getting around it, but hopefully we can have a more um, tribal perspective about it,
Yeah.
in the way that it's like more sacred.
Yes. I love that. I do want to say, like, I feel better than ever to all of our young listeners. Like, it's a beautiful time. Like, don't be scared. It's a second spring, I think is what they call it in the East. It's like it truly is a time of rebirth. And, with that comes some truly pressurized moments. But you feel your power and your purposefulness more deeply than
Mhm.
ever. And
Mhm.
it is a potent time. So
Mhm.
I'm looking, and I really do feel a sense of looking forward to the next decade, the 50s and the 60s, and like,
Yeah.
wow, if this is what's available now. And again, it's not always, cheery, but it's deep and it's real and it's true. And there's such an entanglement of the beauty of touching truth that illuminates those denser points that I feel like it is a wonderful time to seek support and to let yourself be held and to soften and to
Mhm.
receive, like, yeah, you did it, like you made it, but let yourself be held, let yourself be
Yeah.
held.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, congratulate yourself on how far you've come, where you've been, how much you've grown, but also, yeah, the feeling of being held. Like, there's still a little baby aspect of I don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah. That's well
Yeah,
said.
it's funny because, with the midlife transits, it's like Uranus and Neptune are the big players. And for me, my Uranus transit, which I was like, okay, get ready, something abrupt. There might be big changes that are happening. My whole world could fall apart. Guess what? I've experienced before. Give it to me. But what came into my life was cats. And so I didn't expect my Uranus cycle to be so fluffy and so cute. But they showed me so much. And so it's just wild how spirit works, you know? It's like you cannot predict. I did not predict that whatsoever.
Oh, that's a, did I say I wanted to talk about cats?
Yeah, you
Did
said
I
cats.
saying that? I'm like, she's talking about cats. I'm like so happy right now. That we like made it here. That's amazing. And there's like, yeah. How have they ministered to you? I'm going through a similar kind of thing with my kitties. A mama cat decided to have her babies in our backyard, and I've been calling in some type of, some a being to nurture and protect as well as be a recipient of their guardianship. And so this mama who's very feral and very,
Okay.
very unfriendly, but she had
Uh-huh.
babies in our little backyard.
Oh
And
my goodness.
so all the three little babes are, just, yeah, bopping around. And, but I'm going through a kind of deep process of mistrust of the feline nature.
Yeah.
There's a
Hmm.
power there.
Mm.
There's a really deep power
Mm.
to the kind of feline presence. And it's like, it's definitely past parallel life related for me as
Yeah.
so I'm like confronting like where I've misused my power, where I've shapeshifted and utilized, feline um, kind of trickery in order to advance aims that I am ashamed of. And, there's a lot of that there. So when I like look into their eyes, I'm feeling that like almost um, surveillance. I'm feeling
Mm.
like some
Mm.
aspect of like self-surveillance. Like I understand it as a projection, but I also question, how much of it is real. So yeah,
Mm. I
anyway, I'm
love
just
that.
like,
What a
I'm very
topic.
curious. Yeah, your like how you've mentored with the kind of this feline archetype and just, the physical expression of that. Oops.
Yeah, it's so deep, you know. It's like I could say, you know, a stray came into my life, you know, she had three babies and I'm obsessed with them. But the depth of the story, the depth of feeling, the depth of connection, it's like inexpressible. I can barely express it. And I love that you were talking about sort of the feline energetics, um, because it's so powerful. There's something to that. And you know, I tend to see cats. Um, I don't know what the creational process was for cats on this planet, but to me it feels very like a merging of feline and snake, almost like the merging of the reptile and the feline, the reptile and the Draco problem, because cats have that slit in their eyes that other like lions, other felines do not have, but they also carry the feline eye. So it's like this really interesting merging. And so there's a wisdom there. So if we're speaking into the true energetics of the Draco reptilian, if we're speaking into like the sacred, the snake medicine, the true snakes, the true wisdom snakes, you know, it's like they're protectors of the temples. It's like you cannot enter if your field is wrong. This is sacred here. And so they will look you up and down. They will correct you and they will show you true power. And so a lot of, you know, there's been a lot of inversions and a lot of hybridization of that frequency and a lot of distortion with the true snakes, which then you have to use your discernment, whether it's a sacred snake or a, you know, um, and so, and even there's felines, you know, cats that are also inverted and organic divine. Um, but yeah, there's an interesting energetic that comes through that sort of shows you your power and your connectivity and how you create space, how you create sacred space, and that you do take sacred time because, you know, part of the feline, there's also a feminine energetic that it takes all the time needs.
Yes.
And even though you want to take them, it's like you want to take the cats, you want to protect them, you want to, you know, let me touch you, let me help you. It's like they will say no, they will say no. And it's a gradual process of trust, just how the feminine should work. And so
Mhm.
it shows you step by step how to do it. It's just wild. And for me, I still don't know what my generational connectivity is, but a lot of adoption stuff was coming up for me, even though I'm not adopted. I can't name anybody in my family that was adopted, but there was a lot of sort of like emotional purging to the adoption process. So when I was deciding, so when the mama cat had three cats, I then had to give them up to a potential adoptive parent. But I was very sort of strict about that. I wanted the best family. I sort of related it to my inner child where adults weren't really capable or they weren't very responsible and they sort of, put me in situations that traumatized me. And so it was very important for me to be almost perfect, like perfect parent. I don't want to create any trauma. But it ended up there was trauma created. And so yeah, just a wild ride, but it felt as though I was almost giving up my own children and the pain of that, like the retching pain of handing them over. And then it was a whole journey in trust and faith, 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 trust and faith. So, and listening.
And also being the bridge and the vessel, right? As
What do
they
you mean?
do, because these cats were coming to you and you were
Yes.
offering them to someone else. You were home, but a bridge to something else.
Yeah. Yeah, to be that sacred bridge. Exactly. And then the one kitty that I kept, we have a sacred contract, and he came into cat body to be with me at this time to support my mission. And so, yeah, it's just been a wild journey. And so for you, Alyssa, where are you at in your midlife phase? Are you in your Neptune or Uranus? What year were you born?
83.
Okay. So you're probably in your Neptune window, I would assume.
Yeah, I don't think it's your Uranus is next, right?
Hmm.
Yeah, I think that's when I started to get the twinkles. I can't think of the word, but some kind of like sparky something. And that's when I was like, I need Nicole. Where's Nicole? I got something's coming, something big's coming. And I feel more settled. I feel more settled about moving through with the mapping of kind of, yeah, settled with not needing to know everything, but also knowing that so again, a journey of faith, a journey of self-trust. I feel, um, yeah, I feel a deeper sense of self-trust, which I think, undergirds, our ability to move through even the densest moments. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm so glad we got to talk about. I'm so glad that we got to talk about your kitties and your journey there. I know is that the one that you take hiking and you put in a little,
Hmm.
yeah,
Hmm. Yeah.
I love
Yeah.
that.
yeah, your bond is visible and palpable. I love that.
Yeah. And it's growing, that's a part of the relational realm,
Yeah.
as you can't own something directly right away. And, but we are claiming each other and to feel claimed and to feel supported and
Wow.
to get to know each other and who they really are and how you work together. So I'm constantly getting to know him, and I feel like he'll look at me like he's constantly getting to know me. And yeah. And it's wild talking too with like my psychic friends. And so hearing directly what my cat is saying is just a trip. And I recommend it to everybody because I don't have that direct communication, but I'm always sending him psychic messages of like what I need from him, what I want him to do, what's happening. But to hear directly, like their voice is like the craziest thing in the world.
It's amazing. Yeah, you'll have to share with us if any of your friends offer that. I think that's amazing to connect with. And in addition to your own intuition and your own psychic connection to your little beings, your protector beings. But I love that distinction of ownership. I feel like cats have taught me that like we don't, especially dealing with
Mhm.
my children who are like had been accustomed to like their grandparents, mode of ownership. Like you adopt a dog and then you are the dog's owner. You adopt a cat, you
Mhm.
are the cat's owner. And there's just such a wider invitation to understanding that guardianship, that multi-directional guardianship that occurs, and that there is like a moment, and we're navigating that now of like, we have claimed these beings to feed and protect, and we get to mentor with them and we get to go slow and we get to receive their signals and to like more finely attune.
Yeah.
And so it's been an interesting journey.
Yeah, which sort of brings me to kind of what's happening now in the collective. It's like whether you are going through your midlife transits or your Saturn transits, something's and whether you're going through regular transits, this is the time to embody spirituality, your etheric connection here on Earth. What is your Earth connection? How do you embody? What does embodiment really feel like? And how do we ground that into the real? It's like nothing to be analyzed anymore. Now is the time to, it's like we're talking about midlife, and people might think that it's just for a certain age group, but no, we're undergoing a collective midlife crisis collectively on the planet. And so it is for everyone. So it's like, the people who are going through the midlife cycle, they're in a sense ground workers. They're going through it directly and they will have something to share and they've been encoded to share something. Um, and especially to the people who aren't in their midlife transits, undergoing a midlife crisis seems very strange.
Mhm.
And so we are collectively getting more authentic, getting more connected to our true selves, mission alignment, authenticity, um, higher soul connectivity, but it's nothing to be spiritually bypassed. It's nothing to be analyzed. We do that actually. And so it's our connection of why we're actually here. So we're reading that DNA point. We're reading all the DNA structures within our body of what needs to go, what needs to merge, what needs to alchemize, what needs to rise. And so we're reading those signatures and we're doing our best to interpret now. And so sometimes the easiest thing we can do is just do the dishes.
Mhm.
Sometimes it's like the easiest thing we can do is be in our garden because it's a lot and reminding ourselves that Earth has all the answers. And so, yes, I'm an astrologer, yes, I deal with the stars, but the most important connection that we have is this star seed planet, what we are doing here on this star, on this rock, on this planet, and what is our relationship to our greatest orb, ourselves and Earth and others.
Yeah, I love that. I tend to view astrology in my own personal chart as relationship anyway. If I'm looking at an area that I want some more lessons on, like if it's Venus, for example,
Yeah.
my point of contact there is to consider Venus and myself and the earth as like in this trinity relationship and communicate from that angle.
Yeah.
And then what's happening because of where Venus is, but what's happening, within me because of where Venus is. And then how do I express that? And how does it connect in with earth? And how do we be in the body and deeply with our breath and everything that's moving around us? Like you said, it's first, we must trust the process and we also
Yeah.
must do so with grace. And that means sometimes do the dishes, sometimes
Mhm.
read it, or in my case, leave them alone.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Bless the mess.
Mhm. Bless the mess. That's particularly hard for me, by the way, to bless the mess. But
Hmm.
it's rude and that's okay. Yeah.
Hmm.
Oh, wow. We've talked for quite some time. I feel like I still haven't even scratched the surface of what I could ask and,
There's so much to
you
talk
have
about.
what you have to share, but this has been just, yeah, amazing to have have you here on the pod, and I'd love to.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, is there anything that you would love to share in parting? Anything that about your upcoming offerings? We've kind of touched on that, but I don't think we talked about your Thrival Guide.
Yeah, so yes, for those who are in the 1980, 1985 window, my midlife circle, cosmic clock is coming. I am inviting souls who are looking for support during that time, who think that they can do it alone, but feel a little lost. Let's do it together. Let's talk about it. Um, yes, it's one of my most things I'm excited about. Um, and then my Thrival Guide, we are in module 3. So it's 3 parts, 3 modules. We're in the third module because it started in 2023 because I knew that there was a lot of wild energetics coming to the planet, and I wanted to support people during that time. So we have already gotten started. I recommend still module 2, which is all about sort of the energetics of 2023 to 2025 and what the planet is undergoing now and how we're receiving that through our body. And then in module 3, I've broken it down into 2 parts. And so the first part is sort of what transits are happening for this year. And then part 2, I'm completely designating to the nodal shift of Leo Aquarius. So this brings us in both part in many ways to the age of the planet and how we're related to it. And so how we are encoding what this is going to feel like, this sort of crux change point of the age of Pisces, age of Aquarius. So highly recommend module 2, module 3. Module 3, part 2 is coming, but part 1 is out. And then things for the future, I have a lot of ideas, a lot of things I want to do. I still have a lot of secrets, things that I want to share with people. I'm just not really sure how I can share. I don't know exactly the container, what container I'm searching for, but I feel like there's a sort of a container that I feel like is going to house my offerings. But yeah, I have a lot of resistance about that. So we'll see how it's going to come. But I sort of want to take my musings off the Instagram platform and have a deeper, wider space so that people can connect with me. And I want to have more videos. I want to explain more things in depth, but in sort of brief, because it's a lot, so I want it to sort of be ingestible and quick, almost like, you're driving in your car and you can sink into it. I've thought about being on YouTube, but some of the stuff that I talk about is pretty wild. Even though there's a lot of wild things on YouTube, but I don't know, there's still sort of like a privacy thing in me. Maybe it's not for the masses. So I don't know if I'm going to do a mixture of both, things that are not private, things that are private, or it's, under a paywall. So I'm sort of figuring that out currently. And that's a lot of my current pause of which direction should I go. And so, yeah, in 2022, I received basically a download of what's going on currently, and I still have not talked about that in depth. And I keep watching everybody and absorbing what people are talking about. And I'm like, do I release it? Do I release it? Um, and so we'll see how it's going to be released or conveyed, or if I have the impulse to even do it, because sometimes it's like so much. So.
We're here for it. We'll
Yeah.
definitely provide some links in the show notes, so people can find your offerings. And there's like a whole host of yeah, really incredible content on Instagram now that people can digest as well. And on your page, I'm talking about Nicole's page, if that wasn't clear. But thank you so much for being here. It's been such a gift to sit with you, Nicole.
Thank you for having me. I always think that we're not going to have enough to talk about, but there's always more to talk about.
There's so
So,
much more to be
yeah.
continued.
Yeah. But thank you so much for having me in the space. I am so honored that you value my work, that you find a resonance in it and it supports you. And yeah, it gives you a sense of stabilizing the energetics. That's my entire goal. So I appreciate that reflection. And yeah, to be given a chance to share today. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Nicole. All right, until next time. Bye.
Bye.